Hello and welcome to Roll on the Adventure, the show where we create tabletop. Well, Chris, my voice is going. You're gonna have to take this.
As Purple is currently somewhat indisposed by voice problems, I'll be, put up with my voice a bit more for today. So this is Roll on the Adventure, where we make up RPGs, and they normally get a bit weird and very indie. So with that, we're probably going to make Amy's ears bleed by doing our god awful singing again.
Oh, not again.
Oh, this is gonna be interesting.
Feel free to
roll on the
Okay,
adventure.
you can do it.
Roll on,
Roll on the adventure.
the adventure.
Roll on the adventure.
Roll
Sure.
on
Roll on.
adventure. And
Oh,
Amy's
God.
not actually run away, which is always a good start. Problem with having one person that can actually sing.
And I refrained because that's the kind of person I am. Yeah.
Come
I
on,
don't
if
wanna-
I'm in this hell, you gotta come with me.
There we are. Into hell together.
You say this sort of person that you are. You better introduce yourself, Ed.
Oh, must I? Very well. I'm Ed. I'm the wonderful guest star here. You can't see I'm the most beautiful person here as well. I can't help it. It's just fantastic. I'm here. I've got a background of lots of D&D playing, lots of RPGs. Purple's got me into all the weird design stuff. It's the first time really sitting down and really figuring out mechanical stuff. I'm really excited to be here. I'm just excited to do some weird batshit crazy stuff. Go team. Woo!
Nice.
Yes, that's my spiel.
I'm Amy. You guys know me. I am no longer the newest cast member. Huzzah! So yeah, I guess I'm sort of the amateur of this group. So hopefully, I can make a good game with you all.
We're all amateurs here.
Yeah. I'm Chris. I've been on here before, so yeah, don't do game designing for money or anything, but run a fair amount of different games and so on.
So we're all just a bunch of nerds with dreams, is what we're saying. Just a bunch of nerds with dreams.
I think we're all just a
Dreams,
bunch of nerds.
hatred. Yeah.
We're a depressed bunch of nerds with no dreams, but a plan. And what is that plan?
Again, you say plan. I think you might be a touch optimistic.
Plan like things.
Plan light. Diet plan.
So Chris, since you're leading today's adventure,
Oh, yes.
what's up?
So we've got a couple of. So on the previous episode, which was, let's be generous and call it the Christmas special, because everyone was busy. It was basically me and Dave talking RPG shenanigans and gossip basically for 2 hours.
The dream.
So, yes, pretty much. We do this all for free. So we came up with a couple of elements to possibly try and incorporate into our next one.
Wunderbar.
So most controversially, actual dice.
We had
As the
actual
main-
dice.
My goodness,
Yeah, but-
we've really come a long
Yeah,
way.
but we normally couple them with like tarot decks or reading a sheep's entrails or some weird shit.
So
as a-
you want an actual
game
dice
mechanic.
system?
Now, I'm not
Yes.
saying sheep entrails is a hygiene problem, but you can't really pick that out of the Weatherspoons and play it.
I mean, it's on the list of my things I might do for Nova Machina, the game jam.
Yes, definitely.
What,
sacrifice
sheep
a lamb in the middle of the gaming table?
Yeah.
I mean, there's like untangle the lines, party game, like kids adventure games. It's like you take one of those with all your outcomes on, you just dump the entrails on and see what you can get to line up.
Oh, wouldn't
Well-
that be amazing? You have a code book of all the sides you could see. 2 people, and they had to see which one matches up better and how
Oh,
it can bring us
no.
there. There
Oh,
we are.
now-
We've got actual games now. Here
No.
we go.
Now I'm
Moving
thinking of some
swiftly
horrible
away.
combination.
Okay.
And like that Japanese one where you've got to describe the card and you've got to slap down on it.
Guys, we
Oh,
have a
yes.
game. We have a game.
Yes,
Right.
moving
Ran-
swiftly away from sacrificing an animal for
Oh, what boo!
RNG factors. So yes,
What happens if it lives? Big question.
Oh my gosh.
then if you manage to take its entrails out and it's lived, you're either really good or really bad.
What little column A and a little column B?
That was like one of my
No.
favourite troll prestige class things.
What,
Okay.
being able to sacrifice an animal and it survive?
No, like there was a thing I think it was in Pathfinder, with like the troll like sages did entrail readings because
Oh,
they can
yeah.
regenerate.
Yeah, so they cut out their own guts, read it, and then just stuffed it back in. And was like, all right, guys, off we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we actually make this a proper RPG, Chris, what else do you?
Yes, thank you. So yes, dice. So you've also got exploration, tables
Yay.
and filling them in during play, table filling as character creation. Which I feel I've seen somewhere recently before, but I can't remember. Meta tables.
It's like
'Cause-
fallback tables if you don't have a table.
Okay, I was just assuming you've been hitting the alcohol and sequel too hard.
Okay?
Yes.
Alcohol
actually-
and sequel, that is a potent mix.
It certainly.
That's-
I was thinking meta tables would be like all 4 games would be also playing the same game. That's what I take away from meta tables.
I have no idea what it means by meta table, so I'm just gonna.
Neither do I.
Led
This is why we're
blindly.
deciding.
Get me
I-
drunk and I will explain database principles to you sometime.
Oh no.
Delightful. I can't wait.
Oh yeah, talk dirty to me.
I do have sequel chat up lines if I'm really drunk.
Fantastic.
No.
Yeah, I've got several zeros and a 1 just for you, baby.
Apparently-
Slightly better than that.
We
Left
also
join.
want a
not
setting for this game because most of our
Yes,
games. have been
actually
setting
having a
neutral.
setting.
Oh, that does help.
A lot of the ones we've done have been like collaborative setting generation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
or
can-
there's
I can
some
get behind
vaguely implied genre, and you just kind of roll with it
Yeah.
rather than anything.
Let's
like
actually
that.
have a setting this time.
That's
That
fine.
could be
Okay.
fun.
I always compare it to Stars Without Number, which has a setting, but it's so diverse. You could be like, I could just run it for Star Wars or Star Trek or
Hmm.
whatever the goddamn hell I want, even though it has its own setting. So something like that. In
Yeah,
theory,
so we've also got morally questionable characters.
of course.
I'm guessing the setting might be a little dark in some way.
Actually,
player
having
characters.
player characters.
Because we
Yes.
have previously done several things where, yeah, you represent a kingdom and factions within it rather than actual individual people.
That also seems to be the last one on the list.
Oh yes, we also have PCs as kingdoms/countries, so those might be slightly mutually exclusive.
I mean, we could make it like a metaphor, so you're basically like Britannia, or like Helvetica, or like whoever the French one is.
Oh
I
god,
mean, you
like
could
that.
get really weird with it, and your health points could be how many members you have left in the family. And so every time you take damage, you've essentially been assassinated or something's gone wrong in battle or a terrible thing happened there. And you've got to keep your lineage alive. There's all sorts of possibilities.
Okay,
Oh
yeah,
man,
that's
I was
actually
just
a pretty
thinking
cool
if
idea.
we do the sort of bigger heads thing, it could get ridiculously imperialist.
Oh, yes. What could go wrong with
Yes.
imperialism? It's worked for so long.
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, player characters, dice, jobs as opposed to classes,
Yeah.
which I believe was Amy's.
Yeah, I just kind of like the idea instead of having, because to me this entire thing speaks very much of, because my background is in D&D and things like that.
Mhm.
We were essentially trying to do something like that, and I was trying to differentiate it by saying instead of having classes like barbarian and warrior and all those things, like having jobs instead. So one of the things that, especially the idea of exploration, was very interesting to me because that's not a thing that's done in RPGs very often, or at least not, in the same way as we might think of them in like video games, for example, which have the abilities to do that. One of the jobs I thought you could have would be a cartographer. So
Oh
the
man,
PC is
can we have a map?
cartographer. If someone can
Yeah.
draw perfectly.
I'm thinking some sort of hex scroll thing could work.
Oh,
That
yeah.
would.
That's-
Except instead of the like usual murder hoboing your way through pastoral countryside, it's more exploration maybe rather than murder.
Yeah, you could have the cartographer go through the land as the PC, but you as the player helps fill in the gaps of what that land
Yeah.
is.
Hmm.
And that could be a way of creating setting. Because one of the things I think with actually having a setting, which is one of the things we want to do,
Cool.
is we'd all need to agree on a setting to do.
Exactly. Like as well, the same idea we could have could be so dramatic in just the different settings. So, for example, with Amy's idea, a cartographer going around exploring, all these people working as a job to discover things. Really cool setting. The exact same principle of jobs instead of classes could be every person has their job. Every person is a normal person who is just getting by 9 to 5. Suddenly supernatural stuff. How do you, with your job experience, fight that or work together to stop it? Two
That's
completely different scenarios, just from a little tiny change.
So are we talking butcher, baker, and candlestick maker explore the new world?
I think
Yeah.
I personally think because the idea of doing jobs as opposed to classes sort of means we're pushing away from the more fantastical.
Yeah,
In the
more
sense that
grounded.
we're not wizards, we're not warriors. We're we can be interesting things, but things that aren't usually explored. So like a dancer or a cartographer or any of these other things, like a trader.
I mean, dance has been a D&D class since 2E.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not very like less fantastical, more an entertainer, but not a
Yeah.
bard. It's
Yes, more than a geisha than a knife wielding, throwing, dancing person. Yeah.
yeah,
I get
like the lesser focused upon
Yeah.
jobs that would exist in those worlds and could be interesting and have interesting gameplay effects, but because they sound less extravagant, they are not often focused upon.
I mean, court wizard is totally a job.
I personally believe it is, but that's only because my ideal job is to be Grima Wormtongue. I don't want any responsibility. I just want to lean over and go, "Good, my lord, they don't trust you." Forever. That's all I want. It's all I want out of life.
What, to corrupt someone that, to the like power of Saruman?
He could already be corrupted. I just need to be like, "Can't you see my king is weary?" That's all I want to do. That's my life choices.
So Chris, seeing as you're the leader of this operation,
Poor fools, go on.
Yeah.
what kind of thing do you want? Like, what opinions do you have about this?
Yes.
So we've got. Well, if we're going for the exploration theme, if we're wanting to keep the morally questionable characters, that does mean that there's gonna, rather than just monsters, they're gonna have to be actual people to interact with, because it's a bit hard to be morally questionable when you're just interacting with random beasties and probably killing them for food or something.
I mean, you can also have morally questionable paths.
Yes, true.
You can do. It's.
What if
I
the
suppose you
monsters
could go
are
like.
people too?
Yeah, I suppose you.
Yeah. What happens if they're not monsters, but you still can't interact with them because of a language barrier?
That's one of those things that tends to sound really cool and then just get irritating as hell in actual play. Where you
Yeah.
got, especially if you got the GM just miming things in front of you and you're just going. Especially as we will be doing this over voice chat.
Oh, yeah. I was about to say, yeah, that could get pretty bad. No. I'm not sure. Morally questionable, like, because if let's say we do also manage to wrangle in Monsieur City building into the mix, the morally questionable thing could be the gameplay being how much do you get for your city. So once again, this is the spouting ideas phase, I hope, for the love of God. So it could be the case that each turn is how the city around you develops. So your city is developed X amount. Here are your problems with it, because it can only expand so far. And then now this turn has happened, what are your characters doing?
I'm personally thinking more like, unless we get a city each, do like more of a pure roleplay thing.
Oh, it could be that too.
Ooh.
Like there was one. Sorry, go on.
I'm keep going back to this.
Do so.
Like this, like those, the idea of like this the personifications of like a city,
Yeah.
and like maybe that's it.
I would like that if you were a small legions of kingdoms having to work together while still preserving who you are as a kingdom instead of homogenizing.
Well,
That'd be
maybe you're
super dope.
like city gods or something.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Oh my
was
god,
saying.
if you're minor deities.
Your your city gods who have got stuck in some astral wilderness.
I mean, that would be an interesting idea because you mentioned, city gods. Going all the way back to Roman times, there were house deities. You'd have a little shrine to a house deity. And that could be just the same idea, just magnified to represent, a village going to a town, going to a city, going to an empire, and how that changes you.
Well, it's like Norse mythology. The Norse mythologies were Aesir and Vanir. Vanir are the wild magic and the more, wilderness gods, which were very useful but kind of wild and weird. But the Aesir were like, here's what humanity does and we do it very well. Kind of like that counterbalance.
So then I guess the first question to ask would be, who are the players
That's
in
a
this?
very good question.
Are they going to be the city gods? Are they going to be something smaller? Like, what is their main vehicle in this game?
I'm thinking cities, or like
Yeah,
city
now we've got
states.
that. It's
I was
kind
about to
of
say, city states is really ringing to me. Either, if not the deities of the city, just whoever is in charge of that particular government. You know,
I'm
if
still
we are doing
feeling
characters as cities, you could one of your character aspects could be: are you diplomatic? Are you tyrannical? Are you communist?
Oh
Fun
crap!
stuff.
You map out your character.
Yeah.
I think that's where the tables could come in.
Oh yeah.
different culture types and so forth. So if you're young and artistic as a city, then your character, whatever mechanics we
Has
end up
arty
with, would
skills.
get a bonus to create art. Whereas if it's older and militaristic, you're better at fighting.
So almost like an RPG version of Civilization.
I'll be down for that. I mean, this is what Pathfinder tried to do with Kingmaker, but then was like, but they're still D&D characters, and I was like, no, I want to build a kingdom and smash other kingdoms. That's all I want to do.
I don't know about smashing other kingdoms.
No, not smash.
Be like
a bit much, but
I like the idea of these characters being out of their element.
Yeah,
I think in terms of this one, there's probably not going to be much PvP.
Oh, definitely. Oh no, I
wouldn't.
I wouldn't say PvP. I would say it would. If we were to do it, it would be several smaller states having to work together to survive the bigger ones.
Yes.
Yeah, so PvE.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, if we want to bring dice into it, then, or do we want to do something else? Sorry, I had an idea for dice, but if anyone else has a better idea or better flow for it, we're getting ahead of it. No problem. Sorry.
No, I'd definitely be interested
new.
to hear general ideas people have about it. So the idea of having the player characters are the city gods, and let's just for explaining sake say these gods were up in the heavens or wherever and somehow got dragged to earth and are now literally the personifications of the cities which they now have to control. So that's like the basic thing. That's what the PCs are.
I think the question is, do we want the actual cities to be present?
Because
are they off in some wilderness miles away from their actual cities?
Like you've
trying
suddenly
to get
somehow
back?
ended up. Yeah, you've somehow suddenly ended up in. I think the phrase "astral wilderness" was mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Would mean you obviously have some reason to explore, because if it's your homelands near your city, you'd think you'd know about those.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've basically been dumped somewhere, you'd have whatever powers.
Yeah. I do super like the idea of city gods outside their element.
That's a pretty good idea.
So then what would you want to do with that idea?
Well, if we're talking about morally no, sorry, I'm getting ahead again.
Morally questionable is
about it,
fine.
Okay, fantastic. I was saying that if, for example, you are gods of these cities, what happens if your city's alignments and what they believed in didn't mesh with your gods?
Yeah.
You still had to use because if you don't, if the city doesn't believe in you, you don't get your god powers. There's no belief. So you have to appease your city, but also kind of try and make sure the worst parts of it are kept in check. I'm not sure how that would work, but
you could kind of have the contrast between what you are or what you believe yourself to be and what your city believes yourself to be.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a much better way of phrasing it. Yes, thank you.
If those
I love
if
the
those are
idea
in
that we
line.
get the morally questionable bit by having a difference between what the city actually is and how it sees itself.
Yeah.
And I think that reconciling that difference would be a wonderful piece of character character development.
Oh yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So if you think about the way say Britain saw itself, and especially during the Empire days, and contrasting that with all the really shitty things it did that just didn't match up,
I don't know what you're talking about. Britain's perfect. It's crazy. It's yeah.
Yeah.
I
like the idea that that's the questionable bit.
Well, I like that it can work both ways as well. So you can have Britain, for example, be pure and fantastic and best for people and doing all these shady stuff. But you can also have more peaceful nations being we're better because we're peaceful, but still losing ground and losing who they are and refusing to take that.
You could have some places where what they believe themselves to be what they are actually out somewhat more in line, but
Yeah.
that means it kind of constrains your behavior more because you don't have that ambiguity.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a country that thinks it's peaceful but fights a lot,
You can
you
do
can kind
both.
of do both, but less well almost.
I'm
So if we're
thinking
going
you've
with
got like
stats,
different tables you can roll on and stuff that strengthen
Oh, yeah.
different parts, maybe.
That would be a really cool thing to essentially, be how what your city actually does tells you how much you can do. But the more out of line your city is, the weaker you are because there's so much conflict
Yeah.
in it.
so effectively, well, depending on what we go for card gen or whatever, it might be kind of you have a pool of points to spread between those. So if they're in line, you have a lot of points in a few things. If they're more disparate, you have lot smaller number of points in many different things.
Certainly.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, would this then be a game of two phases? Because it's the city seems to affect the god as much as the god seems to affect the city. So presumably you'd have to do both. Because if you had the gods just in a random astral plane where they could not interact with their city physically, that seems like it's essentially the same thing as what Kingmaker does, which is you as the players control the city or town or village, but you also have your player characters who don't interact with that. So I want to kind of steer away from that being the thing. I like the idea of direct interaction.
Okay.
I personally don't. I think like you can show the effects of things that are happening.
Yeah.
Like if a character like weighs on their like their criminal underworld to get something done, it then like there'll be a piece of narration about the criminal underworld, so like becoming more of an important factor. It's like a one-way thing at the because cities work at a different pace.
Exactly. It's like if you do explore a new area and decide you want to expand or something like that, if there's a mechanic for that, you don't have to know every pub and every building and everything. You just expand X. And you know that your building's expanded, but you don't need to know every detail unless people want to talk about it because people are talkative.
Okay.
So yeah, it means you can just kind of have the city as its own thing happening elsewhere that you don't need to massively detail.
Like I'm thinking like effectively the city map can change over the course of the game. And that's like a reflection of what's happening to your character.
Oh yeah, that'd be super cool.
If we wanted to be fancy with this, have you ever seen the types of charts you get them on like manga character stats sometimes where you get it's like a circle with the various categories with the lines going out to it?
Oh yes, like for your personas and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So you could kind of have that for the various like
I think it'd make it more map-like and have like
I just think of an easy way of drawing it.
A criminal a district and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you add in like points of interest.
Yeah. So you could go like, I have a really rough part of town.
Yeah.
Draw a little sketch of that, and that gives you +1 to dirty fighting or something.
Or it could be like, once again, theory. If we did a hex-based thing, it could be each hex has a point of interest, and then you put your alignments on depending on what your point of interest is in each hex.
Is this hexes on your character sheet, effectively?
Or hexes
either on your
map
character sheet or the map or whatever it would be. Whatever is your preference, once again.
I think they're different maps. There's like the map of the place where you are now.
And the map of your own city would be more like your character sheet.
That seems... I'm very curious to see how that would work, because these two things, it almost sounds like you want to do a city builder, but you have to have PCs. That's what it sounds like to me. At this point, I would say you might as well almost ditch the city god idea.
Yeah.
Or do one or the other, essentially, because it seems that if one doesn't affect the other, there's no reason to have that interaction at all.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In gameplay terms.
I think it's mostly just cool fluff.
I guess, but at that point, then call it fluff, as opposed to what sounds to me like you're making a major mechanic.
I mean, it can be, I suppose.
Like, it could be, but it would be. It would have to. You'd have to have quite a lot of talks as to how those two things would interact with each other. Like, for instance, I like the idea of what you were saying earlier with interacting with the underworld. If the underworld in your city gets bigger, it essentially means that it might give you certain buffs to things like fighting, to things like lying. But
Yeah.
on the other side, it might give you penalties to things like having a good reputation.
Well, I mean, that's because you've converted the temple into a barracks.
But that's
Yeah.
so useful.
It kind of depends on, because if, as like Amy says, if you're out in the astral wilderness or whatever, how much time and mental effort do you want to invest in the precise reasoning behind? I now have -1 religion and +1 crime by doing all of that, when it's something that's presumably happening back in your home city, which you're not physically at, may not have any direct actual in-character control over. It's just a thing that happens.
Oh, I do have a weird idea, and it is weird.
Go for it.
So, we could keep it super simple. So, for example, like, your main thing. So you have, let's say for basic purposes, military, diplomacy, religion, etc.
Yeah.
Let's say 5 things. Let's not decide what the 5 things are, but let's just say
Yeah.
the things.
Skills.
Yeah.
5 skills. And your city will be assigned 2. So you want those 2. Hooray. That's all cool. And you want to work together with your 3 neighboring kingdoms so they can all be connected. That's also good. The trick is that your highest stat, your neighbors automatically get a bonus to it because they're right next to you. They're trading. But they might not want the stat you are giving them. So it'll be diplomacy between the other players is what's keeping it going. To be the case of, I know you love your criminal underworld, but I have a crime problem, so please stop it. Or something like that. So it's how much you're willing to not only build yourself up, but also be like, actually, I'm going to let go of this power to make sure that that can hold and doesn't fall before this big kingdom comes and smashes us.
That's a very interesting idea. I like the idea of interaction because that's how cities work, right?
Exactly, yeah.
If you're right next to a place, the 2 places will feed off each other, and can also damage each other.
Yeah. And so with the case of, obviously, you're interested in your own well-being, but people can be prideful.
I do like the idea that if you could borrow someone else's table and you roll on it and you copy the result onto your own table.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for example, it's the case of I'm bad at wealth, but my neighbor is phenomenal at wealth. So, in fact, I'm just going to let him do his thing and I'm just going to scoop off that success.
Oh, no, you borrow their wealth table and roll on that.
Oh, that's cool.
And possibly like a -1 or something because you're borrowing there.
Or maybe there's just consequences. Maybe it weakens that result on your own table.
Yeah.
Maybe it depends how evil you want to be to your other people. Morally questionable, bringing it back, is maybe if one person gets the bonus for a city. So, for example, one person's head of wealth, one person's head of religion, one person's head of military. One person gets that +1 bonus. Not the person who owned the city, but just one person in that alliance gets the bonus. And you have to decide what bonus goes where. And be civil. Maybe. It's a big maybe. It doesn't make sense.
So in terms of the general setting and things, are we still wanting it to keep your city gods in whatever fashion, but you're exploring some new wilderness? That does kind of imply that you've somehow ended up a long way from home.
I really, really like that idea, but I see Amy's criticism about like if there's too much of it, if there's such a disconnect, why do it?
It basically just becomes these are your stats.
Which I'm super happy with, but
it's a valid thing to have. Both of these ideas are completely valid. I would just say that if you want to do them, you might as well give them both the time and effort they need separately, rather than trying to do them both and then try and wrap little strings around them both so they're somehow connected.
I would say if it was longer than a one shot, that might work as a long-term campaign. But we're doing a one shot, aren't we?
My policy with any kind of game is that any connections mechanically and narratively should be strong, never weak.
Yes, I quite concur.
I feel that the narrative way is really nice.
Yeah,
but I agree that the mechanical one being one way is very interesting. Yeah, like the characters not being able to control like their city stuff. This is like it's effectively an extended metaphor.
I do kind of like the idea of sorry if I'm just cherry picking your words, but because we're sort of dealing with the idea of development and change and all of that thing, could one part of the game be mutations? So something randomly changes in your city, like someone gets thrown over, or a new business starts to pop up. Something that changes things that the players could not account for
Yeah.
with prior planning. Like you roll a dice and you get a table, and suddenly you've got a random mutation
Hmm.
that does something and affects you and could affect your other party members.
Well, we're doing PvE, yes, as this description, where 3 cities working together, and if I'm reading it correctly, I might not be. There's another bigger city which is like, "Oi, we don't like you," and that's why we're teaming up. That's
Yeah,
I'm
how
assuming
most
some
online are.
kind of adversary. I don't think we've specifically detailed one yet.
That's fine, but so those mutations could be the adversary's turn, which is, I don't like these 3 cities. The adversary does something. You go, crap. How do we react to it?
If we're going with random tables, we could just have random events of
Yeah,
bad stuff in some.
exactly. But like Amy says, it could be the case of just, for example, adversaries' music becomes really popular. People get a sympathetic leaning towards them. People don't like the military as much. But that, a random mutation, as she says, but to do with that outside source, which also influences that you can't control it.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I guess that thing leads into the question of what's the win and lose condition of this RPG?
Exactly.
Or what
Don't
are
get
the
out the damn wilderness.
I mean, presumably the lose condition is that your cities get destroyed. Like
Yes.
or loses its self identity and thus its god.
and
Yeah.
gets
If it gets just
absorbed into the
subsumed.
empire, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Right.
it gets subsumed
So,
by its neighbours.
The thing is, what we're doing here is that the city is being the driver of change, but not the thing the character has control, like the player has control over. I think we can't split those.
No.
The thing that drives change has to be the thing that the character, like the player, can direct. Otherwise, effectively, we're just rolling random encounter tables.
Oh yeah, I'm completely in agreement. I definitely say that it will be the case of, you have a big control over your city, or you can decide which direction you want to lean your city into, and then outside influence comes. You go, right, this is what's changed. Can I steer it this way? So on and so forth.
In that case, we don't really need the city gods at all.
No. I do like the idea, maybe this is just more of a fluff thing, because I do like the connection.
Yeah.
So one thing that might be interesting to talk about is, in terms of lose conditions, is how health works. Like, what does it mean to die or to be absorbed?
Yeah.
I like the idea of it being represented by a statue, essentially, a statue of the city god.
Oh
And
yeah.
as it loses parts of itself, that sort of, represents loss of part of your autonomy.
Oh, I remember the old black and white games where they used to do that, and I'm a big fan of this idea. Big fan.
But then what would the win condition be?
Well,
could you beat the massive empire? Would it just be surviving? Would there be alternate win conditions?
this thing, it could just be the case that when you get to the end, it's a case of, because once again, we do want to keep it a concise time. So it could be whoever is in charge of the game, DM, whatever you call it, when we decide that, goes, all right, look, time to end it, the last big turn. And then if you survive that turn, you're stuck together, you survived, go team.
So where's the choice on behalf?
The choice, now that is the question. It could be the case that, well, that's the thing, it depends how we want to engage these outside encounters.
Because yeah, we did do similar things back with Primordia, when it was playing as council members, great evil, blah blah blah. But that was essentially you were more or less working together, but not quite. And you, at the end of that will actually use cards rather than dice. But at the end of that, you scored points, and you compared the total points the players got versus what the AI enemy effectively got.
For basically who got to narrate the ending.
Yeah. So for this, if it's, because it is cooperative against a single enemy, or a cooperative against the baddie or whatever, then that does mean that you're either going to have the GM or AGM that runs it, or some kind of AI that you can effectively roll for to see how well they're doing versus you.
Yeah.
I think we did want did we want a GM-less system or a GM system?
Good question.
We hadn't explicitly stated either preference.
I personally like GM systems. GM-less
Hmm.
can work, but not with this. Well, not what we're trying to do here. Unless
Something like this, having somebody explicitly actually describe
Yeah.
the adversary would probably be helpful.
I don't think I'd find that fun.
It depends. I'm a person who, if I was in charge of an evil empire as a GM, I would go into massive detail. If it is something as vague as just the adversary, you could go into so much detail on your particular evil empire. So it could be the exact same game, but instead of an evil samurai army, this time it's vampire werewolves who are really religious, and it changes literally nothing about the game because it's the same basic stats, but it's a different
Is it-
flavor.
We don't really have player character.
no, we do not seem to have them, which is unfortunate.
We've dropped the exploration as well.
I think we could have exploration. There's no reason we couldn't have
I
that.
don't see there's no point. Right, we've got an external threat. External threats make exploration largely pointless.
Not
unless you,
necessarily,
um,
because if you have a larger threat, like one thing a person could do if they're faced with a larger threat is they try and look for things that larger threat either wants or could harm the larger threat. It's like when you're gonna fight the big massive dragon thing. How do you beat it? Well, you don't beat it by just talking among yourselves all the time. You do it by
Yeah.
questing and finding things that would help you.
I think that's a quest, not an exploration. I think that's different.
I think it's the same kind of thing, though. You could explore and say, I explore and find certain mineral deposits, plus something to trading. All of these things could help buff you as a city. So I think exploration, maybe not in the sense of exploring a place like a cartographer would, but
Yeah.
exploring in general still exists.
It depends what you value in exploration. Like some people value the discovery of exploration. Some people do value, as Amy was saying, the resources. And I'm exploring so I can get the stuff so it'll help me. Some people explore just to see the weird stuff they're going to find. It depends what audience you want to play to.
I'm very much on the weird stuff you want to find thing, but I don't see how that's going to fit with this game.
I mean, in the end, we have more arcs after this, so the ideas that we're having now could definitely be expanded into different games. It's never going to be a case that we're going to have all the stuff we want in one game. That's just not going to work.
Never happens.
So we're keeping on like maps as characters, basically.
Yeah.
Yep. We're keeping on table filling.
I'm not sure how, but we'll work it out. I like the idea that you can sort of add things into table slots as part of your turn.
That would be pretty cool.
I like
Yeah.
that.
So basically, you're building up. You build the events table.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
We're getting very board gamey again.
Okay, so then what would you advise to keep it more RPG?
Characters.
So, well, we could still just keep the city gods idea where that is kind of the focus of what comes out of this. So you have the city,
Yeah.
but the actual avatar, the actual thing you play.
Yeah. Yeah,
is
either
still-
an avatar of a god or the monarch of the country.
We've still
So
got at this stage. We've still got turns. We've still got a very rigid play structure, which we can make work. But it was something that I know Amy specifically said. We were brought up about the last one. So.
Yeah, that it was. Yeah, that's because my background is more in board games, so I'm more.
But we're leaning very heavily to having that split again.
Yeah. So at that point, then the question is, we should choose. Do we want to do the more player character type thing, which is more RPG-ish, and I agree with that, or do we want to continue with more of the city aspect, or do we want to do player characters and minimize the city aspect to essentially building the city builds the god, but you play the god. That's what you do.
That's where I was going originally, but I think
That's-
you guys have got
yeah.
some really good stuff otherwise.
Yeah. Because I was under the impression, once again, because I'm an influential sheep, that essentially you are either the god or the monarch of said country. So when you had to discuss things with the other kingdoms, you had to actually discuss it. You can't just be, oh, I want to do X. You have to be like, no, I am this king. I had to look out for my kingdom.
And so it's kind of like the role playing more comes from what you're doing at the table.
Yeah, so it is the case of like, you can say,
Yeah.
oh, I want to take one religion, but like, absolutely not. My kingdom is this. I have to defend my kingdom. Sweeten the deal. If it works just mechanically, it will be, oh, I'm sure we can mechanically perfect it. But that's when you introduce the role play, which is your kingdom is, for example, tyrannical. So if you have the diplomatic one saying, oh, we can discuss that, you go, nope, absolutely not. My kingdom says X. And I must defend my kingdom with position of X.
Oh, I do like the idea that you set up you set up lines that you can't cross,
Yeah.
and when they inconvenience you, you have a choice.
Yep.
You can gain power from sticking to them, or you can sort of capitulate.
Well, it depended if we wanted one of the lose conditions to be, like falling, like your identity of the kingdom. Because if it is the says like, okay, I concede, you can get more power, but
Yeah.
you lose your identity. But if you say no, you don't get as much power, but you are that kingdom and you're stuck by your principle.
So I like the idea that you've got. If you think Tenra Band show where you got basically two types of XP,
Yeah.
right? You play into your the line that you've drawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say, I am not willing to, send armies, or build an army or have an
Exactly.
army within my walls, right?
Yep.
And you stick to that, and you put a point on it, and you stick to that, and you put a point on it, and at various points you can sort of like peter them out one at a time, for a little bonus. Or if you've already stuck to it a bit and you capitulate on it, you take like a wound equal to the sort of magnitude of how many times it's inconvenienced you.
Yeah.
But you also get all those points to like dump into one thing.
I like that a lot.
So when the dam breaks, it's big and important.
Yeah. And it's also, that would be a good thing too, because it gives you a lot of emphasis to role play as well. So it's not just like, oh, why is this guy being a dickhead? It's like, oh no, we see mechanically where he wants to do it too, but also that's his thing. Like, the kingdom of Amarilla or whatever it is wants to be lean directions or whatever it is.
What do people think about that? I think that gives us a way to put more role playing in it.
Yeah, I'm generally down for anything from Ten Banshee Zero. I do like the idea of having the whole "this is my thing,"
Yeah.
and you can kind of like a self-inflicted geesh almost, where you can kind of breach it, and that gives you the freedom to do that, but you're giving up part of yourself, and
You can't use it again.
Or whatever hit points analog we have, that kind of reflects that you are literally cutting part of yourself off.
Yeah.
So if you do that too often, you will die.
I think it would be an interesting idea because I've obviously never played the game you're taking this from. So it'd be interesting to learn about it.
Certainly.
I think one other question I had during this, because I was listening to you guys talking a lot about how the RPG comes from, or essentially the negotiation between the three players. How does combat work, if at all? Is this a combatless game? Because to me, you can have a lot of RPG occur in battle.
It's true. It's
But will your characters ever be actually going into battle?
That's the question I want to ask.
If not, it should be abstracted.
Yeah.
If not, it should be abstracted. But if it's in battle, then like how in depth do we want a battle system to be? Do we want this is a question I want to ask, because the thing with any game, regardless of whether it's a board game or an RPG, it needs something the players are, a win and lose condition, some conflict resolution mechanic, and maybe a setting. Those are the things it needs to run.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, what kind of conflict resolution mechanic do we have? We have negotiation between players.
Rolling on tables.
Rolling on tables.
That could definitely come into it. I agree.
Would we be actually having a different combat mechanic than generic resolution mechanic?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so you'd be like,
you just pick a different starting table.
Yeah.
Like military uses a starting table. Diplomacy uses a starting table. That kind of thing, and then you layer on your extra stuff on top of that. You can sort of like get rid of a consequence here, or add in a bonus here as part of of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. let's give that a try then.
And in the end, you roll like a handful of dice and you take all the outcomes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because I'm just also the thing you were talking about was negotiation, and obviously I think some of that would have to be mechanically inclined because the problem is if you do negotiation as the players themselves have to negotiate because that's the only reference your player character would have is how good their player is at negotiating. You could
Uh,
you could have the bad scenario where one person is either really forceful or very good at negotiating and manipulating, and they will always win over the other two players, and that breeds resentment.
That can be an issue with any actual anything that actually involves real
So
world
you also
negotiation,
want some
because some
kind of
people are just
mechanical
better or
basis to
pushing.
it.
Yes.
Because if you have that, it at least adds an element where it's open to everyone, as opposed to just people that are good at negotiation. Because my RPG thing is never to make something narrow that only a certain type of person could play it. So I like the idea of having negotiation. Like maybe it gives you bonuses if you can negotiate well, but I don't want it to be the only way to resolve it.
Well, I just thinking that it's not it's negotiations a game. It's essentially saying what are we going to do with this scenario. So, for example, scenario adversary does this. They need X amount of whatever resources we have to defeat it. And in
Or at least
theory,
you need to stack the table in your favor.
exactly, stack the table. So
Okay.
how is each individual kingdom going to put their resources in? Because it might be that one per kingdom puts too much resources in the first round and then needs to rely on its allies, and it's that delicate balance of how much am I willing to go forward or volunteer others or that stuff. So it's not.
Depends on how much are we thinking you could, because at the moment, in terms of resolution mechanics, we've got rolling on tables, and the items on tables can, in some fashion, swap around,
Yeah, you can change them quite a bit.
which makes sense. But if we're talking kind of trading and negotiation stuff, that implies you can actually lose stuff. So,
Yeah,
what kind of things can you offer?
I mean,
And
you could make like you could make something on the table worse in order to gain some points to make it better.
Okay.
You could also there's instability, which I think is the sort of mechanic for measuring when you go back on things you said you do.
Yeah.
yeah,
And maybe certain abilities, like certain powers, can only be activated at low instability or generate instability.
Yeah, I can do that.
So effectively, at the beginning, you pick some building. You pick like sort of a floor, like like a layout, like a bait. Like, am I a city on a river? Am I a port city? Am I a crossroads that's grown? Am I a mountain pass? Am I a fortress city? Right, and that like you pick some things there, and that sets like your baseline of what you can do in a turn. And then you add buildings, which then like add bits to that. And like, say, if you have a granary, you can exhaust the granary to do something else that turn or something like that.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's things that you need to do something a previous turn to power them.
Yeah, so like stagger your turns then. So essentially be like, we agree to do X, so then next turn we can do X.
Yeah, but then like each player has like a slightly different engine.
Well, there could be some buildings which require two people to work together. So like an embassy, you would need two countries to have an embassy, otherwise it won't work because a country one embassy doesn't work.
I mean, technically, like it could work more that your embassy. Sorry, I'm trying to explain this.
No, that's
your
fine.
embassy is to the big empire, not to,
Oh, of course it could be. Yeah,
or to unallied city states.
exactly.
So we're sort of, I guess, kind of getting a stat type thing for the cities, like how democratic they are, what kind of things they have, what special features they have. It might also be interesting to see if you could have a goal that each city has, and they have one goal that's like almost their secret goal. It's like this is my personal win condition.
I'm not a big fan of that in this. Not
fair
a
enough,
secret
it's just
one.
an idea because I just like the idea of having more role-playing opportunities, and to create a character, your character needs to be different than other people, and conflict breeds difference.
Of course, it all depends on if as a secret goal, maybe not. If it was like an open policy, for example, like austerity, let's have that, let's get political. Then the idea is our goal is to save as much cash as possible. Everyone else can see they need to save as much cash as possible.
Yeah, but that's one of those lines. That's just a line. We don't need a separate construct. For
Exactly.
it,
So it depends if you want to have just one solid line, have one solid line, and one you actually can waver on.
I think they should all be solid lines.
Yeah.
It's just the more times they get you into trouble, the bigger they get you into trouble, the more you build on them.
Yeah. I definitely think a city with two solid "I will not cross this" will work.
Yeah, and maybe having a couple of softer lines, which if you cross, there are consequences.
6 points of lines.
Yes. So many lines.
6
Like a
points
graph.
worth of lines.
And like maybe you could have like, I don't know, the really principled place that has a lot more lines than everybody else does in terms of like soft lines that they can have consequences for, but in return they get a bonus, like maybe a more universal bonus to everything because they have a great reputation because they are principled. But then you could have a place that's like barbaric, which could have less soft lines, but it still has some of the harder lines. But it has negatives in certain places just because you're trying to, as a barbaric place, trying to talk with bigger, more principled places that might not want to speak to you.
It could be the case that you can actually decide if you have hard line or soft line. So for example, everyone has to have one hard line. Have to. Completely non-negotiable. But if you then wanted to go, by the way, I also want to have, let's say, we don't eat meat. We're only vegetarians here. Once again, completely out of my ass, but as an example, you can decide that is also a hard line we won't cross, or soft line, which is the exact same mechanic but half the amount of gains and half the amount of losses. So it's essentially you decide if it's just a little bit less punishing, but still add a nice roleplay twist. Same mechanic, no more additional math, but an easy mode.
Easy mode.
Yeah, just to add a bit of simplicity because we obviously simple is good.
I can agree with that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like basically you put points into lines. Everyone gets the same number.
Yeah.
And you can store stuff in them and you can break them.
Yeah.
And depending on how much you store and how much you break, different things happen.
See, that's what I'm down for. From what I'm hearing about the game we're making right now, the game is about sticking together and trying to survive while maintaining your principles. And that is a game I'm very interested in playing.
That's kind of cool. It's nice hearing it said out that way because, to be honest, I've been very uncertain about it.
Yep.
So, right, we need to do this one sentence description thing, right?
Okay.
What do we think? So, how are we going to describe the play as characters, kind of? Is it a group of small city states, a wavering alliance? How are we going to describe them? Because it's important.
A tenuous alliance of city states.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that idea.
Right, I will get that down.
Right, so a tenuous alliance of city-states.
I love the word tenuous, by the way. Completely off topic, but it's just a great word. I can't believe I got to use it today. What a great day.
Oh my gosh.
I like using weird words. Don't judge me. Don't hashtag judge me. You don't know my story.
Okay, so a tenuous alliance of city-states.
Hold back. I don't know. Like resist the rise of an empire.
You could say attempt to resist that's a
Strive to maintain their identity?
Yep.
Yes, that's an important bit.
Yeah, I think. Could you say attempt to resist an insurgent force or something?
Yeah.
And attempt
It's
attempting
less of a
to
literal insurgent force.
some word in replacement of that, but that general idea.
An outside force. And let's look up thesaurus.com to help us out in the times.
and then and
Yeah.
then at the end of at Insurgent whatever force, you could have while attempting to maintain their own identities.
I mean, I've currently put a tenuous alliance of city-states struggle to maintain their identity amid the rise of an empire.
Oh, amid is a good word too.
It's a very good word.
I like that idea. Yeah.
I'm down for that.
So, like, the idea is the empire's new,
Yeah.
or at least
Mm-hmm.
I think we could give it some traits, like it's using like the identity of an older empire, or it's
Oh, that would be good.
it's like vengeful, maybe, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it has its table. It rolls at the start of the game to say it will have this slight tweak to the Empire this time, so it keeps
Yeah,
it fresh.
Cool.
This
yeah.
is its motivation.
But it's
Yeah.
like we have 7 traits for the evil empire. You
Yeah.
get 5.
And that means if someone wants to GM it, they can, and then if someone doesn't want to because they're lazy, they can just.
I think we should always like, we either need to decide if we have a DM or not.
I personally think GM or not, but
We're going to be able to write a better game if we decide.
all right, GM then.
Yeah, I think for this, have a GM. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
GM then.
did here.
All right then.
Okay, so the only question I have is because one of the things you haven't touched on that much is the idea of setting.
Yeah.
Do we want to establish what kind of setting this is, or do we want this again to be more setting neutral?
Let's have a setting.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, the most obvious thing that comes out to me because we've been talking about city gods and all of that is medieval or in the age of empires like Roman and stuff.
I was
like
about to say Roman sprang to my mind very quickly.
You could
Well,
even
'cause the
have it like
whole-
literally in the Roman era.
Yeah.
Well, because the whole fighting off evil empires does make me think of like 300, and the
Yeah.
Athenians were very proud of their reputation for.
We
Certainly.
could also go
Such
like
things.
Mesoamerica.
Oh yeah. Actually, Mesoamerica, like South America, had a lot of those
Yeah.
kinds of conflicts,
The Aztecs were. Yeah,
Oh,
rough
yeah.
match.
and the horrific things the Mayans did. Jesus.
I mean, like if you think about like the there was a lot of like strategic points as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, what they call those big underground waterways.
Oh
Oh, the underground aqueduct thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah, they
they're
had a
still
name, I
around
can't-
now and still working.
yeah. I can't believe it. God, history.
Oh no, I mean like the natural one.
Yeah, like the caverns themselves, but they managed to like sequester and board it and like madness. I tell you, madness. But yeah.
So I guess do we want it to be Mesoamerica then?
Yeah, I'm down for
Really?
Mesoamerica.
Are we going for real world or sort of analog?
I think analog because
I
none
think
of us have
analog
enough
rather than
historical
proper
knowledge for
world.
this.
Yeah, there's always someone who complains was like it's too real and this actually didn't happen. Yeah, just it is like that, but not quite.
Yeah, it's
So
that
it's
sort of
inspired
aesthetic.
by that.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we like put some groundwork in and make it like
Yeah, we can
not
do that when we
just
do
a
the
character.
mechanics.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so what's our one sentence for this game read?
At the moment, it's a tenuous alliance of city-states struggle to maintain their identity amid the rise of an empire.
Do we want the setting to be explicit in the title or no?
No, it doesn't. It's nice to have a setting, but I don't think it is like our central key thing.
Okay, yep, that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
Hmm.
I'm perfectly fine with having that as our
Yeah.
one sentence.
I am as well. I think that really encapsulates it.
Right, quickly before we wrap this half up. So, things you kind of are looking forward to kind of seeing happen. What sort of stuff should be in the game? What sort of stuff should be happening?
A moment I would enjoy in a game like this would be the case that there is something we need to do together, and there are two people who are like, hold on, we are both about to cross a line. How do we solve
Yeah.
it?
It's like turning away from like the obvious thing.
It's a case of, yeah, we can all solve it, but then we both break kind of who we are as civilizations, and that'd
So
be
you've
terrible.
got to find another way.
Yeah,
So problem solving.
yeah.
Okay. Purple, what would you want?
I'm looking forward to the bit where someone very, very mildly crosses a line,
Yeah.
and it's just enough with the bad table roll to flip them into like some sort of civil instability. That they basically have to spend like the entire next turn
Picking
recovering
themselves
from.
up. I gotta admit, I'm now looking forward to that now that you mentioned. Yes.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the lines come up. Particularly looking forward to when you whatever tables we end up with for the Evil Empire, where they're doing something like we could easily defeat them, but it would require crossing a line. And how kind of
Yeah.
willing are you to
You
play
might not
off?
be able to survive doing so. I think should always be
Yeah.
a threat.
It's like to begin with, you might be more cavalier, and then towards the end, it's like, if I
Yeah.
do this again, we'll win, but I'm going to lose myself.
Wouldn't that be a crazy thing, though, to have two of your kingdoms be like, oh, yeah, we can take out the Eels Empire now, and the third one being, if I do, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And trying to figure that out.
Yep.
I think those would be interesting.
I think that'd be fantastic, fascinating.
I guess the stuff I'm looking forward to is I still like the idea of mutations and just random things happening that people need to take account of, in line with, talking about not losing ourselves and not crossing the lines that we have set for ourselves. I like the idea that apart from the evil empire, there's also just random things that happen.
Yeah.
Because you're a city, you're made of people, and people do random things.
I mean, the tables aren't just Empire table and your table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like the idea of that, just things happening and you having to deal with them, because that fits very nicely with you must find another way.
Yeah. I dig it.
Okay,
We have a plan, guys. Holy crap, we have a plan.
we do. It only took us an hour.
Yeah.
That's
Swimming.
how it goes.
So yeah, let's join us after the break, and we're gonna nail down how a character is built and what it means to be a city. Join us later, folks.
See you
Ciao,
later.
ciao.
Bye.